Syrian activists and monitoring groups say at least 5 civilians, including a child, have been killed in airstrikes in the province of Homs. They say Syrian regime jets carried out several strikes on the towns of Arastan and Anhulia in central Syria. Well, let's get more on this. Our Francis Collings is in Gaziantep, close to the Syrian-Turkish border, and he joins us live. Francis, how are the talks in Geneva being affected by what is happening on the ground in Syria?
Well, there's no doubt that there is a lot of tension at play in Geneva, has been since day one of these talks, but this has been ratcheted up somewhat in the last few hours, in the last few days. A letter has been sent to negotiators saying it's from the armed revolutionary factions, and they're accusing the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, of bias towards the regime. They say there's not been any progress in terms of pledges for delivering aid, halting the bombing of civilians. And they also say that the idea that was floated of Bashar al-Assad remaining, and this was floated, don't forget, by the UN envoy, remaining in power, is unpalatable. So there has been a strong response on that letter. In the last hour, the chief negotiator, Riyad Hijab, don't forget, he is a former Syrian prime minister who defected 3 years ago, has issued a statement saying there has been violation of people's rights and of international law. So on both sides, especially from the negotiating committee, there's a lot of pressure on the UN Special Envoy to keep these talks afloat, to keep things moving forward.
Indeed. Now, Francis, more and more reports of violations to the cessation, and there have been more attacks in the last few hours. What's the latest?
Well, we do have this cessation of hostilities, which still is in effect in theory. This, of course, began at the end of February, but in the last few hours there have been attacks in Latakia province. Don't forget, this is the home province of Bashar al-Assad. It's the home of the Alawite sect who run Syria and have done for effectively the last 40 years. So attacks on government forces occurred there, as well as separate advances in Hama against government forces in the last few hours as well. But conversely, there has been, of course, attacks in and around Aleppo province over the last few days, a lot of which have angered the negotiations committee and the opposition factions that are represented in Geneva. And the town of Khibat al-Nagus, which is close to Hama, has almost been taken by some opposition factions. So in more than one location, as ever with this conflict, Ali Jean, there's a lot going on, certainly out on the western side on the coast in Latakia, in Aleppo, which is just to the south of where we are, and also further south of that in Hama province.
Francis Collings, like you said, not just one area, but violence in multiple. Thank you for that.